Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sound Mind podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of music psychology. I'm your host, Sophia, and as a music psychologist, I'll be guiding you through everything you've ever wanted to know about music. So, whether you're a music lover or just interested in the science of sound, you're in the right place. So, join us. Have you ever woken up with a song stuck in your head and realized that it was actually playing in your dream? Maybe it was a song that you know well, or maybe it was something completely new, almost like your mind was composing music while you slept. Well, you're not alone. Research shows that music does show up in our dreams, and depending on how connected you are to music in your daily life, it could be happening far more often than you realize. So, in today's episode, we'll be exploring why music appears in our dreams, what it can symbolize, and touch on whether it's possible to influence your dreams using music. Plus, I'll share some real stories of famous musicians who quite literally dreamed up some of the world's most iconic songs. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get into why we dream about music, let's start off with the basics. Dreams mostly happen during a phase of sleep called REM sleep, which is short for rapid eye movement. And this stage is actually quite distinct because while your body is essentially paralyzed to prevent acting out dreams, your brain is anything but. In fact, your brain waves during REM sleep look almost identical to when you're awake, which is why we sometimes call it the paradoxical sleep phase. It's during this time that we experience our most vivid dreams. But what exactly is going on inside the brain during REM sleep? Well, it's the emotional and memory centers of the brain, areas like the amygdala and the hippocampus, that are especially active during this phase. The amygdala is the part of the brain that processes emotion. It's the area that lights up when we experience things like fear, excitement, joy, or sadness. And the hippocampus, on the other hand, is responsible for storing and retrieving memories, especially those long-term and emotional memories. Interestingly, these are the very same areas of the brain that are engaged when we listen to music. In fact, studies have found that listening to music activates several regions of the brain. The auditory cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for processing sound, the limbic system, which processes emotional responses, and even motor areas, especially when we're tapping our feet or swaying to the rhythm, since music, of course, has this inherent link to movement. So, music, in other words, it isn't just a sound. We know that it's a deeply emotional and embodied experience. And this makes music an almost perfect vehicle for the brain to use during dreams. And what's more, musical memories are among the most durable memories that we have, often preserved even when other kinds of memories fade. That's why patients with dementia can still often sing along to songs from their youth, even when they struggle to remember names or places. Now, let's talk about how this plays out in our dreams. During REM sleep, when your brain is at its most creative, emotional, and memory-driven, it's like the perfect environment for music to appear. When the hippocampus is in full gear, processing your daily experiences and emotional memories, music, which is so intricately tied to our emotions and memories, becomes part of that narrative. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking, logic, and decision-making, becomes much less active during REM sleep. And this means that your dreams aren't bound by the rules of reality or logic. They don't have to make sense in the traditional way. Without the logical filters of the prefrontal cortex, the emotional and creative parts of the brain are free to take the lead. And this allows for much more spontaneous, vivid, and surreal dream content, which is why we sometimes experience such bizarre or strange dreamscapes. And music fits perfectly into this. It's spontaneous, emotional, and it doesn't need to follow the constraints of reality. So, in short, dreams are emotional and memory-based. Music is emotional and memory-based. So, it's only natural that the sleeping brain sometimes weaves music into the fabric of our dreams. It's almost like your brain becomes a DJ while you sleep, remixing your emotional life into dreamlike songs and soundtracks. Okay, so now that we understand the basic mechanics of how dreams work, let's dive a little bit deeper into the why. Specifically, why do we hear music in our dreams? Is it a random occurrence, or is there something more going on? To start off with, let's talk about how common music in dreams really is. You might be surprised to know that a fairly significant number of people report hearing music in their dreams. Research suggests that about 4 to 8% of remembered dreams involve music in some form. Now, while this might seem like a small percentage, it's still significant, especially when we consider how many people regularly experience dreams without any musical content at all. Interestingly, for those who are more musically engaged, the percentage goes up. So, musicians are far more likely to dream about music, with some studies indicating that up to 40% of their dreams contain musical elements. This can include playing an instrument, composing, or even hearing new original music in their sleep. So, the key factor that determines how often we hear music in our dreams seems to be musical engagement. This means that if you actively engage with music, whether it's through playing an instrument, composing, or actively listening in your daily life, you're more likely to encounter music in your dreams. And this brings us to something called the continuity hypothesis, which basically states that our waking activities, particularly the emotional and habitual ones, do influence our dreams. In other words, the things that we do during the day, especially things that we have a strong emotional connection to, tend to show up in our dream life. When it comes to music, this means that actively engaging with music increases the chances that we'll dream about music. And on the flip side, passive exposure, like hearing background music in a cafe or a store, is much less likely to result in a music-filled dream. So think about it this way. If you're a musician, you're deeply involved in the process of making music. You're spending hours playing, composing, or listening. And that intense interaction with music naturally carries over into your dreams. So if you're a professional musician who's spent the day playing an instrument or working on a new composition, you're much more likely to dream about playing music, composing, or even hearing new melodies that you've never encountered before. But on the other hand, a regular person who loves music but isn't a musician, they might still have music-related dreams, but more often than not, those dreams will feature songs that they already know, the ones that they listen to emotionally, like a favorite playlist or a song tied to a special memory. I guess that makes sense, right? But why music specifically? What is it about music that makes it appear in dreams, especially when other elements might not show up as frequently? Well, researchers suggest that dreams function as a way for our brains to process emotions and memories. And since music is such an emotionally rich experience, one that we deeply connect to on a memory and emotional level, it's a natural candidate for showing up in our dreams. Music has this amazing ability to evoke emotion. Whether it's a song that makes you feel nostalgic, excited, or comforted, music taps into deep emotional centers in the brain. And that's why it makes sense that music, especially music that holds emotional significance, might weave its way into the dream world. And interestingly, studies have shown that the emotional tone of the music that we listen to during the day can influence the emotional quality of music in our dreams. If you've ever listened to uplifting tunes before bed, you might find that your musical dreams are more positive or joyful. On the other hand, listening to sad or melancholic music might lead to dreams that are more somber or introspective. Now, take a moment to think about this. How much is music really part of your daily life? Is it something you actively engage with, like singing along in the car or curating playlists? Or is it more like background noise, playing passively while you work or relax? Either way, it might be shaping your dreams more than you realize. Have you ever noticed familiar songs showing up in your sleep? Or maybe certain types of music seem to echo through your dreams, even if you can't quite place them? The connection between your waking relationship with music and your dream world might be deeper than you think. The sounds, feelings, and memories you associate with music during the day could be quietly weaving their way into your dreams at night. Now, I don't know about you, but I've always been one of those people that loves to analyze my dreams. I used to keep a dream journal next to my bed where I would write down my dreams as soon as I woke up so I wouldn't forget them. And then I would spend time reading about the symbolism of what happened and what it could mean. I just find it so fascinating. So, what does it mean when music shows up in your dreams? What are these musical moments trying to tell us about our inner emotional world? Music in dreams often acts as a powerful symbol, a window into our emotional life, memories, and even unresolved feelings. It's not just about the melody or the lyrics. Music in dreams can carry deep emotional meaning. One of the most common ways that music shows up is through nostalgia or longing. For instance, if you hear a song from your childhood, it might be connected to memories of home, family, or a simpler time. The emotional tone of the song, whether it's uplifting or melancholic, can amplify the emotional message of the dream. A nostalgic song could trigger a dream where you're reconnecting with a part of yourself, or it could reflect a longing for something lost or forgotten. And this ties into a key psychological concept: identity and self-reflection. The music you hear in your dreams may not just be a random song. It could represent something central to your identity or emotional state. For example, a song from a past relationship might signal unresolved feelings, a need for closure, or the need to process a chapter of your life that you maybe haven't fully moved on from. So let's explore a few of the common emotional themes that music in dreams can represent, starting off with unexpressed or stifled creativity. So if you're someone who hasn't had an outlet to express yourself recently, whether through music, art, writing, or even just plain daydreaming, your subconscious might step in. And one study found that people who are creatively inclined often report more vivid and emotionally intense dreams, especially when they haven't had opportunities to express themselves during the day. So dreams about composing music, improvising, or performing can be your brain's way of working through this creative tension. It's as if your mind is saying, I need a space to create, I need to express myself. And then there's success and fear. Dreams often help us process emotion tied to achievement and fear, especially when music is closely linked to your identity or goals. If you're dreaming about performing flawlessly or hearing a triumphant piece, it might reflect confidence or a sense of accomplishment. But on the flip side, many musicians, and even non-musicians actually, report performance anxiety dreams involving forgotten lyrics, broken instruments, or being on stage just unprepared. And these dreams can mirror waking fears of inadequacy, imposter syndrome, or perfectionism. According to one study, people often rehearse anxiety-inducing scenarios in their dreams as a form of emotional regulation, essentially simulating what-if situations to process them more safely. Nostalgia is another big one. We all know how a song can instantly transport us back to a certain time, place, or person. And when that happens in a dream, it might be your brain's way of helping you process something unresolved from your past, whether that's a memory or even a lost version of yourself. The emotional tone of the music can often offer clues about what the past moment means to you right now at this moment in time. And finally, there's identity. Music is a huge part of how we define ourselves. So when the style or tone of music in your dream shifts, it might reflect a deeper change happening within you. Maybe you're evolving, or maybe you're craving a new kind of energy in your life. And these changes might be tied to stress, transitions, or internal growth. For example, if you're usually drawn to high energy music, but dream of more peaceful piano melodies, it could represent a craving for calm or introspection. One study found that dream content often mirrors changes in personal identity, especially during life transitions like moving, breakups, or career changes. The type of music you hear in your dreams could be your subconscious helping you process that evolution. Now, let's talk about the emotional content of these musical dreams. In fact, they're often more positive and emotionally charged. Research indicates that people who dream about music frequently report feelings of joy, awe, and inspiration. Music does have this unique ability to stir up powerful emotions, and that's why a certain song can bring tears to your eyes or fill you with excitement. And when it appears in dreams, it often acts as an emotional amplifier, heightening the intensity of the feelings involved. But as we know, musical dreams aren't always purely joyful. They carry sometimes a bittersweet sadness or mixed emotions. Think of a song that can make you feel both happy and sad at the same time. That duality can reflect complex feelings like the tension between growth and loss or success and sacrifice. Researchers have found that dreams involving music often are accompanied by a deeper level of emotional intensity than other dreams, possibly because music taps into both memory and emotion in such a profound way. So, I want to circle back to musicians and the way that dreams of achievement and fear can play out in their subconscious. While music in dreams is often uplifting or inspiring, it can also take on this more anxious or distressing tone, especially for those who perform or create music under pressure. And this is particularly true for musicians who tie their identity and self-worth to their musical abilities. Research has shown that people who are deeply invested in a creative field are more likely to dream about their craft, and those dreams can be intensely emotional. According to one study, musicians not only experience more frequent musical dreams than non-musicians, but those dreams also tend to be more vivid, emotionally charged, and sometimes ridden with anxiety. Take stage fright, for example. You might dream that you're just about to perform, your instrument in hand, the crowd is waiting, but suddenly your mind goes blank. You forget the melody or your fingers won't cooperate. This kind of dream is a textbook example of performance anxiety manifesting in your sleep. It's your subconscious replaying and rehearsing the very scenario that you fear the most. And then there's the broader fear of failure. A musician might dream about being booed off the stage, playing the wrong piece, or simply freezing in front of an audience. And these dreams aren't just random fears. They often stem from the real, intense pressure that musicians feel to succeed, to prove themselves, or to maintain high expectations from others, or even themselves. And then there's imposter syndrome, that inner voice whispering, "You're not good enough," even when all evidence points to the contrary. Musicians who struggle with this might have dreams where they're exposed as a fraud. Maybe they're asked to play something they don't know, or they're put on a stage with no preparation. These dreams reflect deeper insecurities, fears that talent or success might not be real or deserved. What's important here is how these dreams function almost like emotional mirrors. They reveal the stress, fear, and vulnerability that many musicians carry with them, but might not always voice out loud. The music in these dreams isn't just a soundtrack. It's a symbol of worth, of pressure, of hope, and of fear. In this way, dreams become a powerful space where the emotional highs and lows of being a musician are quite literally played out. So, whether you're a musician or not, whether it's a joyful song or one filled with anxiety, music in dreams often serves as a direct line to our emotions, memories, and identity. And sometimes it's those more complex or difficult feelings like fear or nostalgia that we most need to explore. So the next time that you have a dream about music, make sure you ask yourself, what emotions does that song stir up for me? And what might it be telling me about what's going on inside? So, now I want to talk about some of your experiences with music in dreams, which I asked about over on Threads. You all shared some fascinating and super beautiful stories about how music shows up in your dreams, which offers a glimpse into the creative and emotional ways that our minds work. Super interesting. So, let's explore some of the experiences that really stood out to me. So, one person shared how they often write entire symphonies in their head at night, and while most of it fades when they wake, sometimes a snippet of a jingle remains. And another listener echoed this, describing how they hear gorgeous orchestral pieces in their dreams, but when they wake up, they feel crushed that they can't recreate this beauty. They even mentioned that they tend to be most creative at 2 a.m. And this speaks to how our minds, especially in the stillness of sleep, can tap into deep wells of creativity. It's almost as if music in dreams allows us to access something beyond our conscious mind, creating such beautiful pieces that we might never consciously come up with during our waking hours. Interestingly, some of you shared experiences where the music in your dreams felt so incredibly vivid and real, so much so that it almost seemed like it existed outside of your mind. One listener recalled a dream from the 70s where they heard a record by John McLaughlin at a friend's house. The dream was so vivid that they even remembered the album cover. But just to clarify, the song doesn't exist in real life. But they said, "It was so real, I can remember the cover to this day. I actually went to shops and asked about it. Nobody could convince me that it wasn't real." And that's just so crazy. The sense of realness is something that I'm sure many of us can relate to. The idea that music in dreams doesn't always feel like it's part of our imagination, but rather something that we're experiencing in real time. Another story shared was similar. This person recalled dreaming of a song by REM that didn't actually exist in real life. After a couple of years, they were able to actually record it with their band, even introducing it at shows by saying, "This song is by REM, but they don't know it." I actually also think it's really funny how the band that they dreamt about was REM, like REM sleep. It's kind of funny, but these are such fascinating stories. I would love to study these occurrences just on their own because, wow, our brains are so crazy, right? We all exist in our own realities. Music in dreams also seems to have a deeply emotional and spiritual aspect. One person shared a moving experience about their mother, a musician who had passed away, visiting them in a dream with a song that felt like it came from heaven. And the emotional connection that music can create, especially when linked to loved ones, is truly profound. In this case, it's almost as if music becomes a bridge between the living and the departed, providing comfort and a way to process emotions during sleep. Thank you so much for sharing that deep emotional story. It's really beautiful. Several of you who are musicians also shared how music appears in your dreams in connection to your practice. One violinist who plays in an orchestra and ensemble mentioned that intense practice sessions mean that they often wake up hearing the concert music that they've been working on. They even encourage their students to practice until they dream the music because it helps with performance. And this idea of dream practice shows how music in dreams can enhance learning and performance, allowing the subconscious to reinforce the work that we do whilst we're awake. Another musician who's a singer-songwriter shared that they hear music in their dreams but have only been able to capture one melody to turn it into a real song. This is a great example of how our dreams can be a source of creative inspiration that we can later bring into the waking world. Lastly, there's a physical aspect of music in dreams. One listener shared a fascinating experience of waking up mid-dream while actually singing in their sleep, which was especially surprising since they don't usually talk in their sleep. And it's interesting how music can become a spontaneous expression of our emotions, almost as though it's embedded in the dream itself. Another listener described waking up with music playing in their head and almost viewing it as the soundtrack to their dream. And this idea adds a whole new layer of meaning to our dream experiences. Music isn't just a passive background element, but an active force that shapes the emotional atmosphere of our dreams. And what's particularly intriguing is how this music can stay with us even after the dream has ended, lingering in our minds and creating this emotional resonance that carries on into our waking thoughts. And one last submission as well, someone said that it's actually how they got the idea to try out making music. They had a dream that their song was playing on the radio before they'd even ever written a song, and that's what encouraged them to get into it. And for me, that feels like a deep symbolism. I think it comes back to that emotional and creative expression that I mentioned earlier, this unexpressed creativity, yearning to do something with your skills and something that might not have been tapped into yet. And I think that's such an amazing story. Wow, what a great selection of experiences and submissions from you all. It's truly fascinating to hear them directly from you, and I just love it. So thank you so much for sharing. Overall, your experiences, they really highlight how music can serve as a tool for both personal expression and inspiration, even in our dreams, which leaves this lasting impact on our waking lives. So I think that's such a great way to kind of summarize the topic. So yeah, thank you all so much for submitting. Now I want to move on and talk about one of the most intriguing aspects of dreaming, which is the idea that we might actually be able to influence what we dream about. As we've explored so far today, music has a profound impact on our emotional and psychological states. But the question is, can it also shape the content of our dreams? Well, some recent experiments and therapeutic practices actually suggest that the answer might be yes, to some extent. So let's dive into how music is being used to influence dreams and what research has uncovered about its potential. Let's start off by talking about lucid dreaming. You know, those surreal moments where you realize that you're dreaming while you're still in the dream, and sometimes you can even control it. It's a phenomenon that has fascinated scientists and psychologists for decades. And when you bring music into the mix, things get even more interesting. There was a fascinating experiment where researchers played familiar songs to participants just before they fell asleep. And the idea was that those songs might show up in their dreams. It's almost like a breadcrumb trail leading to the subconscious. And in some cases, it actually worked. Participants reported hearing the exact songs in their dreams, or at least experiencing emotions closely tied to them. Others, however, noticed nothing at all. This kind of variability highlights something really important about lucid dreaming. It's incredibly personal. Another study found that while external auditory cues like tones or voices can be integrated into lucid dreams, the level of dream control varies significantly from person to person. In other words, just because your brain can hear a sound during sleep, it doesn't mean that you'll be able to consciously interact with it. I remember seeing forums online where people try to teach others how to lucid dream, and it seems like it is something that can be almost developed over time. But still, this opens up this fascinating possibility that music might act as a sort of emotional anchor or guide in our dreamscapes. Even if we can't control every detail, listening to familiar or emotionally resonant songs before bed could gently influence the tone or themes of our dreams. Now, if you've ever dozed off to the gentle hum of ocean waves or ambient melodies, you're not alone. Sleep apps like Calm and Endel are becoming hugely popular for a reason. They use slow tempos, soft textures, and nature sounds to help calm your mind and body. But here's the question: do these soundscapes actually shape what we dream? Well, research actually says maybe yes. One study found that the types of sounds that we're exposed to during sleep can subtly influence the mood and content of our dreams. When participants were exposed to positive ambient sounds, like soft music or rain, they reported having more uplifting or peaceful dreams. On the flip side, those who heard harsher noises like alarms or industrial sounds were more likely to report nightmares or anxiety-themed dreams. So while it might not be as direct as scripting your dreams, these auditory environments are shaping the emotional palette of our dream world. So you might want to think twice about falling asleep to that true crime podcast. One of the most promising areas of research into music and dreams is in the field of music therapy, particularly in its use for trauma healing. Music therapy has been shown to help individuals process emotions and memories, especially for those with PTSD. Some therapists have used a technique called dream rehearsal to help individuals confront traumatic memories or emotions in their dreams, using music as a guide. Dream rehearsal involves creating a positive or neutral version of a traumatic dream scenario and practicing it consciously before going to sleep. Music plays a crucial role in this process. So, for example, a therapist might suggest listening to calming or empowering music before bed to help reshape a distressing dream. In one study at Stanford University, participants with PTSD were asked to visualize more positive outcomes in their traumatic dreams whilst listening to uplifting music. And over time, this led to a reduction in the emotional intensity of their nightmares, suggesting that music can serve as a powerful tool for emotional processing during sleep. In a similar way, something called dream incubation techniques are sometimes used to help people focus on a specific issue or desire, such as overcoming fear or even just finding a solution to a problem. Dream incubation involves deliberately planting an intention or theme in the subconscious mind before going to sleep. The goal here is to influence the content of your dreams by focusing on a specific thought, emotion, or problem that you hope to address in your sleep. So one common technique here involves creating a dream playlist with calming or empowering music that aligns with your desired outcome. And the idea is that by listening to these songs before bed, the dreamer's subconscious mind will start to incorporate the music's emotional tone, helping to shape the content of their dreams. For example, someone hoping to overcome feelings of fear might listen to uplifting music with themes of strength and empowerment. And similarly, if someone is seeking a solution to a personal issue, they might curate a playlist that encourages focus or insight. The process of dream incubation works by guiding the brain to focus on specific emotional or cognitive cues during the pre-sleep period. This can prime the subconscious mind to process these themes more deeply while dreaming, resulting in dreams that reflect the individual's intentions. In this way, music serves as both a trigger and a guide for dream content, helping the dreamer to shape their nocturnal experiences in meaningful ways. This technique has been explored in some therapeutic settings, such as helping individuals with unresolved emotions or traumas to reframe their experiences. By consciously rehearsing positive or neutral dream scenarios, individuals can reduce the emotional charge of their dreams, allowing them to process their experiences in a less distressing way. So by listening to these songs before bed, ideally while visualizing a calm or empowering scenario, you're priming your mind to process those cues more deeply while dreaming. It's definitely not guaranteed, but for many, it helps shift the tone of their dream life in powerful ways. And perhaps what's most profound about this is that it gives us this sense of agency. Even if we can't control the dream itself, we can set the stage. And through music, we can guide our subconscious towards healing, insight, or simply a more peaceful night's rest. I think part of our human fascination with dreaming comes from the fact that we often don't have control of it. So I think all of these interesting research-backed ways of being able to have some sense of control of our dream life really fascinates us as a human race. And I think it's something really interesting where we can get art forms such as music involved to help us tap into those. To end today's episode, I want to talk about some stories of how musical dreams have shaped some famous creative works. Throughout history, some absolutely iconic pieces of music have been inspired by dreams. And these stories not only show the profound connection between our subconscious and creativity, but also highlight the power of dreams as a source of artistic inspiration. So let's take a look at a few famous musicians whose dreams led to the creation of some of the world's most beloved songs. One of the most famous examples comes from Paul McCartney. He literally dreamed up the entire melody of Yesterday, one of the Beatles' most iconic songs. When he woke up, he thought that he must have heard it somewhere before because it felt so familiar. He spent a few days trying to figure out if it was an old tune, but eventually realized that it was something entirely new, something that had come to him in the night. Paul McCartney later described it as a moment of musical déjà vu, where the song seemingly existed before he even wrote it. And I actually think it's really interesting how the theme of Yesterday is one of longing and nostalgia. And those are some of the most common themes that I mentioned earlier that often arise in musical dreams. It seems like he actually had a way of connecting with music through dreams in general, as Let It Be was also reportedly inspired by a dream that he had. Paul McCartney's mother actually died when he was just 14 years old, but when the Beatles were on the verge of breaking up, Paul had a dream about his mother who reassuringly told him to let it be. And the next day, he started writing the song on the piano. It's a pretty amazing crossover between dreamscape, spirituality, and creativity. Another legendary dream-turned hit comes from Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones. Richards famously dreamt the guitar riff for I Can't Get No Satisfaction. He actually woke up in the middle of the night, grabbed his guitar, played the riff that he heard in his dream, and then promptly fell back asleep, with the tape recorder actually still running. And the next morning, he listened back and found the exact riff that he'd recorded in that half-asleep state. He didn't even remember playing it, but that riff went on to be one of the most recognizable in rock history, which is pretty iconic. Another striking example comes from classical composer Igor Stravinsky, and I wanted to bring this up because his groundbreaking ballet, The Rite of Spring, was partly inspired by a dream also. Stravinsky described having a vivid vision of a solemn pagan rite, he described it, in which a young girl dances herself to death, surrounded by elders in a ritual sacrifice to the god of spring. And this haunting image became the core narrative for The Rite of Spring, a piece that would go on to revolutionize classical music with its dissonant harmonies, primal rhythms, and absolutely shocking energy. At its 1913 premiere, the music and the choreography were actually so radical that they caused a near riot in the audience. So, unlike McCartney's gentle melodies or Keith Richards' catchy riff, Stravinsky's dream led to something chaotic and jarring, yet no less brilliant. It shows that musical dreams don't always deliver what's seen as beauty or comfort. Sometimes they surface raw emotional intensity, tapping into deep psychological forces that shape daring and disruptive art. These stories remind us that dreams are more than just fleeting images. They can be creative gold mines holding melodies, messages, and emotions that we might never reach in our waking state. They make you wonder, what songs, ideas, or stories might be hiding in your dreams, just waiting to be brought to life? And that brings us to the end of today's journey into the mysterious and fascinating world of music and dreams. It's clear that our subconscious minds are rich with music potential. Just like in reality, music in our dreams, it isn't just background noise. It's a mirror of our emotions, a tool for healing, and sometimes a spark for a once-in-a-lifetime spur of creativity. So whether you've ever dreamt of playing an unfamiliar melody, heard a long-lost song that brings back a rush of memories, or have woken up from a dream where music felt more real than anything else. It's all part of your brain's deeply personal, emotional storytelling. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, maybe put on a song that moves you. Let it linger in your mind. Let it become the doorway to whatever your subconscious wants to show you. You might just wake up with a tune in your heart or a new perspective. Maybe you'll dream a song that changes your outlook on your current life situation, or could even be the world's next hit. You never know, right? But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me on The Sound Mind. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please rate or review on wherever you're listening, and make sure to share it with someone who might just find it interesting. Don't forget to follow us and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Also, come and say hi over on Instagram and on Threads at the Sound Mind Talks. That's where I get all these amazing stories from you all and encourage you to get involved. So do join our community over there. I would love to have a chat with you. But until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and I'll see you on the Sound Mind.